inherently superior to the other. Okay? You cannot make the argument to me, at least, that one is better than the other. But new systems believe they are superior to the other, okay? To the previous. So the polytheists believe they are superior to the animists. The monotheists think they are superior to the polytheists. And the deists think they are superior to the monotheists. Okay? And because of this sense of superiority, they try to crush previous worldviews. Okay? So these four worldviews are not in competition with each other, but the new ones seek to displace the old ones. And this has led to a lot of conflict throughout human history. All right? So this is the overall framework we're working with. I know it's a bit simple, but for the purpose of this class, it's good enough, okay? All right. So now what I'm going to do is explain the framework for the next 3 classes. Okay? My argument to you is the French Revolution was ultimately a religious crusade. That is the main thesis of the next 3 classes. In each class, we will introduce different elements of this crusade that made it possible. For a crusade to happen, you need 3 different types of geniuses. You need the poet to envision the future, okay? The poet. But then you need the prophet who has the courage to take the people into this new land. And then you need the prince or the conqueror who has the conviction and the determination to physically conquer this new land and expand the revolution, okay? So the poet is Rousseau, Jean-Jacques Rousseau. He wrote The Social Contract. We'll be focusing on him mainly today. Okay? He's the one who introduces the idea that it's possible to build a new world based entirely on reason itself. All right? That's Rousseau. Then you have the prophet. The prophet is the one who has the courage to lead the people into the new land, even though it may cost him his life. And this person, his name is Maximilien Robespierre. Okay? Maximilien Robespierre is, in my opinion, one of the most misunderstood and underrated individuals in human history. Next class, we'll focus on Robespierre. Without Robespierre, the French Revolution could not have succeeded. And then now you need a prince who will take the ideas of the prophet and he will militarily expand into the world and conquer a new world and build a new world. And this person's name, of course, is Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon. And this is the last class. All right? And my argument to you today is that without the active cooperation of all 3, if they're not able to build on each other's work, the French Revolution would not have succeeded. Because if you just look at the French Revolution, the odds were so against the revolutionaries, right? They were not only against the aristocracy and their own people, they were up against the entire world. Britain, Prussia, Russia, Austria, everyone wanted to destroy the revolution before it threatened their nations. So the odds were completely against the French Revolution, but they succeeded. And it was only because of the cooperation of these 3 particular types of geniuses: Rousseau the poet, Robespierre the prophet, and Napoleon the prince. Okay? So that's what we'll be doing these next 3 classes. All right. So let's talk about the ideas that underpin the French Revolution, the Enlightenment. Okay? How do we get into the modern period where the ideas are now reason, debate, and progress? Okay. So let's go back to Dante. Dante's Divine Comedy is a prophecy. It is a new understanding of the world. Okay? So what the Divine Comedy does is, what it helps people do is take all these new structural forces that are being unleashed onto the world and understand it in a new way that unleashes 3 major movements. Okay? These are, of course, the Renaissance, the Reformation, and the Silent Revolution. Okay? Now, as these things are happening, what else is happening is the Gunpowder Revolution. The Gunpowder Revolution. And these things combine in order to create massive structural changes within European society. Okay, so we discussed this, but there are 3 major changes that are happening throughout this period. The first is the transition from feudalism to a nation, the idea of a nation. Okay, at first it's an absolute monarchy, but then after the French Revolution it transitions into a nation state. Okay, from decentralization into centralization, basically. That's the first major change. Second major change is from rural to urban. Basically, from agriculture into industry. Okay? And the third major change is from religion into science. All right, and this is what's happening in Europe because of the gunpowder revolution. Now, what's important about this is with these structural changes comes massive demographic, political, and economic changes. Essentially, what's happening is that new groups of people are being created. And these groups of people are who we collectively call the middle class. Okay? So let's look at the middle class. All right, so previously in Europe, there are, just roughly speaking, two major groups. Okay? There's the nobility and the clergy. Okay? There's almost no difference between the two because they intermarry, they come from the same families. Okay? But they're the leading elite of society. Okay? You have the tall people, the nobility and the clergy. And then at the other end are the peasants and slaves. But of course, I mean, like, this is not that simple. I mean, you always have middle class, you always have tradespeople, you always have people working in towns, but they're a minority. And what's happening now, because of all these changes in society, is they now become an increasingly powerful group of people. They're the ones who are driving economic change. Okay? Now, the middle class is an extremely complicated set of people, but roughly speaking, we can divide them into three major categories, okay? Three major categories. The first is what we call the bourgeoisie. The bourgeoisie. Okay? The bourgeoisie is a French term that we use, and it comes actually from the German, which is Bürger. Bürger means the leading citizens of a town, the burghers. And the leading citizens of a town usually are the factory owners, the merchants, the people who trade, the bankers, the people who have control of money, the lawyers. Okay? So these are the bourgeoisie. These are the elite. Okay? And this is a new group of people that work very closely with the nobility, but they have some differences. Okay? And the thing to remember about these people is they tend to be conservative because in terms of status, they already have all the status that they want. Okay? And over time, what will happen is that the king and nobility will increasingly depend on the bourgeoisie for financing. Okay? So they pay for wars, they pay for new industry, they pay for roads. Okay? So the bourgeoisie are the ones who are most heavily taxed. But they're usually conservative. They're really happy with the way things are. At the other end, next to the bourgeoisie are what we call the petite bourgeoisie. Alright? And these people are not rich, but they're solidly in the middle class. They're comfortable where they are, okay? These people are school teachers. Maybe they're restaurant owners. Maybe they're notaries, okay? So the thing about these people is that they tend to be aspirational. They're not happy with their lives. They want more. And as such, they are opportunistic. Okay? Usually, the people who are most likely to lead the revolution come from members of the petite bourgeoisie. Okay? So most of the leaders of the French Revolution, the most radical members, were provincial lawyers, okay? Lawyers who worked in small cities. They're not part of the elite, the bourgeoisie, okay? But they're pretty comfortable where they are. Okay? They're the provincial elite. If you look at the communist revolution, right? Mao Zedong, he was a petit bourgeoisie, right? He was a provincial elite, not a Beijing elite. All right, and the last group is what will be referred to in the future, okay? Not now, as the proletariat. Proletariat. And the proletariat are basically artisans, craftspeople, people who work in cities and in the urban centers, and they have a specialized craft that makes them valuable, okay? They're not peasants, they're not poor, but the problem is they are very precarious, okay? Precarious. And what this means is that as the scientific revolution progresses, new technology will start to replace the artisans, okay? Like a sewing machine. And as such, they lose their livelihoods. So their lives are very precarious. Therefore, they most likely tend towards violence. So these are the foot soldiers of revolutions. Okay? The petite bourgeoisie are often the thought leaders, but the proletariat are the ones who provide the muscle. Okay? So you look at most revolutions, this is how it works. What's really important for us to understand is that, first of all, these categories are not strict. Okay? There are lots of interchange between the proletariat and the peasantry. There's lots of interchange between the bourgeoisie and the nobility, okay? These categories are not static. The other thing is that the loyalties of each group will change according to the circumstance, okay? So the petite bourgeoisie, it's not definite that they will rebel against the bourgeoisie. It depends on their economic interests. And it is not definite that the peasants will work with the petite bourgeoisie against the nobility. In fact, during the French Revolution, this is really important, the nobility and the peasants were working together to suppress the revolution. Why? Because the French Revolution wanted to destroy the Catholic religion.